Well, happy Hogmanay, everybody. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Hogmanay is the Scottish word. I don't know if that's considered the Gaelic language or not. It's a Scottish word for the last day of the year, what we call New Year's Eve in English. And I'm going to attempt to make a Scottish treat that is, I guess, quite traditional at New Year's, called tablet. I've never had it and I've never made it, but Rob, the old gardener guy, a Scot expat who lives in Finland now, mentioned it in a comment to one of my videos, and of course I had to go Google and find out what tablet is. So it doesn't appear to be too difficult to make and only has a few ingredients, so we'll give it a try. When it's finished, read what I found online here, the description of it. Says it's hard to describe if you haven't had a Scottish upbringing. It is like toffee, but it's not chewy. It's like fudge, but it's more grainy. And it's basically a wee bit of heaven in otherwise dreck country. Well, I think I qualify here for the dreck country. We're just about to have another winter storm, although hopefully this one's going to be all rain. That is a kilogram of just plain white sugar. Kilogram in pounds is 2.2 pounds, I think. And it doesn't say how much to measure milk, but it just to put in some fresh milk just to dampen the sugar, which I'm not quite sure why we would be doing that, because we're going to be adding other liquid ingredients, and why the quantity isn't given there, but fingers crossed that it all comes out in the wash, so to speak. I'm anxious to try it. It looks very good in photographs. I've also had the idea that while I'm doing this, I will tell you some New Year's related stories from where I live. I'm old enough now that I can say what New Year's used to be like, because these things the old traditions here, unfortunately, have died off. They were a lot of fun, but the new generation doesn't seem to do them anymore. Well, I think we'll call that dampened sugar. The next is sweetened condensed milk, and it says around 400 grams. Well, this is a 300 milliliter, which is the standard size can for sweetened condensed milk. And I weighed it can and all and got 440 grams or something like that. So close enough, I think. I'm going to say that that's 400 grams of sweetened condensed milk anyway. It goes when the whole thing is finished, you turn it out on a shallow tray, like a cookie tray. And the one that they're talking about, I'll give you the measurements here in a minute. I get rid of this can. Mine aren't that big, so I've greased so you butter the trays generously so that the mixture will come up when you cut it, I guess. And I can't find what they're talking about for measurements, of course. Pages and pages to these instructions. I'm going to put the link down below, and even if you don't make this, it's well worth going to read this recipe. The author of the thing has done a regular comedy routine. Okay, the tray that they're using is 310 by 480 millimeters, or 11 by 19 inches. Mine aren't that large. Mine might be deeper and still hold all of it, I don't know. But anyway, I have buttered 2 trays just in case. Now, there's just one more ingredient, and that's 100 grams of unsalted butter, which probably I should have cut up more, but I didn't. And now on medium heat. Okay, let's try that again with the phone shut off. Never fails. Get a phone call every time I'm trying to do something here. A little bit more condensed milk in there that I didn't get. Basically now you just keep stirring until this dissolves. heat. So while I'm doing that, I'll try telling you my New Year's story number 1 here. Many years ago, a long time ago, when I was a child growing up around here, the young people did a thing called lucking, bringing luck, New Year's luck to people. I don't recall girls doing it. I might be wrong, but maybe people wouldn't let their daughters out in the middle of the night to run around. I'm not sure. I only remember, of course, all my friends when I was a child were boys. I guess I don't remember any girls doing it, but hours before daylight, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, we would get up and go around the neighborhood to people's houses, pounding on doors and screaming Happy New Year. And nobody was upset by this because they were expecting it to happen anyway. They would eventually, you get somebody up, they would wake up and come to the door, and you had with you a brown paper bag blown up, like a lunch bag size paper bag, blown up and tied with a string. And that gave them their luck. Their luck for the year, in theory, was in that paper bag. You gave them the bag, and they always had a treat of some sort prepared for the person who was the first one to the door. You get a little package. There was always a little bit of money in it, but nothing much, some change or whatever. But we're talking back in the 50s and early 60s here, so some change was worth something back then, I guess, as well. But there would be other things. It might be some chocolates that were left over from Christmas, or some fruit cake, or little things like that. Just a nice little package to give you. And the person would then take that bag with their luck, and they would tie it to their doorknob, and let the next child that came along know that somebody had already been there. Now, some people didn't take this too seriously, and others took it quite seriously. My grandmother was from Ireland, from Donegal, and I don't know in other ways how superstitious she was, but she certainly was very superstitious about that. Her kitchen, at that time anyway, when I was a child, her kitchen stove, her range, was wood-fired, and that bag would hang behind the stove on a hook up on the wall all year. And New Year's Eve, she would take that year's bag and burn it in the stove. And believe me, nobody got in that house until they brought her her luck for the year. So that was somebody that took it seriously. And I can remember my father telling me about when he was a child growing up doing it. There were actually people who wouldn't let you bring them their luck if you weren't a fair-haired child. My father had dark black hair, so that was probably why he remembered that one. But you had to be a fair-haired child in order to bring certain people their luck. They thought it was bad luck if you had dark-colored hair. So that's story number 1. I've got a couple of more that I'll relate to you as we go on here. It is sort of liquefying. I'll wait until all the butter is melted till I do the next thing here. The next thing being that once it has liquefied, it will still be quite white, and you should take a little sample of it and put it on, like the plate that I'm using for a spoon rest, just to have that to compare as you go along and it turns darker and darker. You want it to be a nice golden brown, and stirring is very important or it'll burn to the bottom. Looks okay so far anyway. I hope I have it in a deep enough pot here. I'm using, as you can see these things on here, this is actually a pressure cooker. I use this pot a lot for doing jams and jellies and things, just because, not using it as a pressure cooker, but just because it has a very heavy bottom. I have other heavy bottom pots, but this is the nicest one that I have, and less apt to burn in a heavy bottomed pot. And you don't want this stuff to burn, I guess. Well, I will take a little sample of that on the plate here, just to have it to compare to. And I'll bring you back when I've got this up to the beginning of a boil. I don't know, I think I have been stirring maybe 10 minutes or so. That's what it says it would take. and it has just come to a boil. I have turned the flame down as low as it will go, and now you can just let it do its thing and stir occasionally. I guess I'll stir for a bit longer here just to make sure it's not sticking or burning on the bottom. The instructions say if you see some brown streaks appear in it, not to worry, that's just that it's beginning to caramelize, and I have seen those. And then it goes on to say if you see black streaks coming in it, you have burnt it. Good luck trying to clean the pot. So far no black streaks. Well, the other, or another anyway, of my New Year's stories here. When I was growing up, children here did not hang their stockings at Christmas for Santa Claus to fill. They would hang their stockings New Year's Eve, and the person who filled them was called Mother Goody. I have no idea where that tradition came from, if it's something that's completely original to this area, or if it was, brought in with some immigrants from someplace else in the world. I don't know. I remember mentioning it somewhere in writing, I guess, because I think it was long before the internet, and yeah, I think it was replying to an article in a newspaper or something, and got several very indignant replies as to how greedy that was making children and whatever. Well, that's ridiculous. We didn't get anything of any great value in that stocking, but looked forward to it just as much as we did Christmas morning. There would always, in mine, there would always be some comic books, and I don't see it anymore, but you used to get popcorn, caramelized popcorn in cake form. It was sort of in a cylinder, several cakes wrapped in this cylinder, and I think they might even have been different colors at different times, each cake a different color, done with food coloring or whatever, and an orange, and I loved orange pop, so I always got a Fanta orange pop in my stocking, and maybe some little toy, but it wasn't anything, no great amount of money was wasted on it, but the children look forward to that just as much as children who hang their stocking at Christmas time. And I don't know if there are any families here that still do that or not. A cousin who lives in Florida, and my aunt and uncle, well, my uncle is dead, and her mother, my aunt, is still alive, but she's in a nursing home in Halifax. She was up here late fall sometime cleaning out some of the things out of the house. They have the family home on the market, and she arrived here with, I have to remember to open it on New Year's Eve. She arrived here with a big red sack like Santa Claus would have his toys slung over his back, and told me that I could not open that until Mother Goody came. The only thing that she would tell me for certain that in the bottom of that sack is my grandmother's bean crock that she used to bake beans in, and I can hardly wait to get that out, because that for me would be a treasured item. I was often down talking with my grandmother, and every Friday evening, if I was down for a visit with my grandmother, she would be putting the beans on for Saturday. She did baked beans every Saturday. A lot of the family that no longer lived at home visited on Saturday to get baked beans from my grandmother, so I'll be pleased to have that crock. And I don't know what the other items might be, but I have a Mother Goody bag this year. Well, this next process could take about 20 minutes, just stirring occasionally, and you're waiting for it to get to a amber color or golden brown color or whatever. And also we'll do what they call a soft ball test. When you're making any kind of candy, you put some of this in some ice cold water, and this shouldn't form a hard ball, but it should form a soft ball that it says will eventually sort of run off the spoon if you hold the spoon upright. So that's when it is ready to put in the pan. So I'll bring you back when it's getting a little darker. Well, I guess you can see the difference in color now. And I guess the next phase here is subjective. It's just however you happen to like it. The person who wrote the recipe that I'm following said they like theirs light in color. If you wanted it darker in color, or darker in color, and a little stronger flavor, then to just keep cooking at this phase longer. But I think what I will do now is I will do the the test with the ice water and the spoon. First I'll show you these samples that I've taken as I've gone along here. Okay. Not much difference in the last two. That's the white when I began, and then a short time later it got this little bit darker again, and this is slightly darker, but it's only a short time ago since I did that one, and that is setting up nicely, so I suspect that the cold water and the spoon thing is going to work too, but we'll know that in just a second here. The only thing that I did that I've added that I forgot to mention, I did add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. One of the suggestions was to use vanilla sugar, and I do have vanilla pods that I could, yeah, that's forming a solid ball, so I think we're ready. I do have vanilla pods that I could have put in sugar, but then you have to wait a week to 10 days to get vanilla sugar, so it tastes good at that phase too. Very sweet and short, that much sugar. So the next thing to do here is to shut the heat off completely, which I'll do, and stir vigorously, trying to scrape some of the crystallized sugar that's formed on the side of the pan down in and stir it in. But also you're watching for it to thicken a bit, and not to thicken too much, which is, never having done it before, that's kind of hard to decide just what's the right time is. But you want it to still be able to pour it, but you want it to start to thicken up some also, and you're stirring vigorously. So I will bring you back when it's ready to pour into the tray, or trays. I still don't know how much space this is going to occupy. It has thickened up quite a bit, and hopefully is still pourable. Seems to be mostly running out of the tray, and I think I'm only going to need one, out of the pot I mean. I think I'm only going to need the one tray. Mine is probably deeper than the one that they used when they were making the recipe. Well, kind of awkward to do this with the camera in the way, so I'll bring you back in just a minute after I get it all in the tray. I think that worked out quite well so far. We hope we get something that can be cut later on. I love the instructions here. It says to pour it as fast as you can out of the pot, because as it cools it'll set up like concrete in the bottom of the pot, and somebody will just have to eat what's left in the pot. I think that's quite true. I've been tasting the bit on the spoon. It's very nice. Next part is to let it set until it is hard enough to cut, and they say overnight or so. I may put it in the refrigerator to let that happen a little faster. It says not to worry if sort of crazed areas appear on the surface. Might be seeing something like that right here. It's just some of the sugar crystallizing. But so far so good. It sort of looks like what they've got on this sheet here. I'll come back when it's time to cut this thing. Well, that process is over. I've got the tablet all cut up on a plate here beside me. I don't know if you can see Angel or not, but she's very interested in the plate full of tablet. I'm sitting in a chair rather than on the sofa, but that doesn't mean a thing. I might have a 50-pound lapdog in my lap at any minute. I'll give you a look at this. The flavor is excellent. I'm going to taste one here and make believe that I haven't already tasted it, but I have. And the description of it is quite accurate. It said that it was similar to toffee in flavor, but more like fudge in consistency, except that it's grainier than fudge. The flavor is really good, of course, with butter and sugar and sweetened condensed milk. I could eat a can of sweetened condensed milk with a spoon anytime. It's delicious, but I hope you'll give this a try. It wasn't that difficult, really, and not exactly what I would call cardiac friendly with the butter and the sugar that's in it, but as a treat once a year on New Year's Eve, Hogmanay, it's well worth trying. And very good. I really like it. And now I'll take just a moment to tell you my final New Year's story. I had a very dear friend when I was growing up. her nephew always teased her and called her an old maid. And her response was always, "I'm not an old maid, I'm an unclaimed blessing." Well, she was in the Canadian Army, the Women's Army, during the Second World War. And if I remember rightly, what she did was recruiting. I know we had the draft during the Second World War, so men either volunteered or were drafted. They didn't have to be recruited. So perhaps she was recruiting women for the Women's Army, I don't know. But often they were billeted when she traveled around the country doing her work. There were homes that volunteered to take in Army personnel, free of charge type thing, to help with the war effort. And when she visited St. John, New Brunswick, the largest city here in the province, she always stayed with the same family. And I'm certain they were from the UK. I think perhaps their daughter was born in this country, and the older couple emigrated here from somewhere in the UK. I'm thinking Wales, maybe Scotland, I'm not sure. But anyway, after the war was over, she was invited one year to go up and spend New Year's with them. So she went, and they sat around New Year's Eve and enjoyed the evening or whatever. A lot of guests in the house. And when the clock struck midnight, everybody jumped up and started chasing my friend around the house and chased her out the door and locked the door behind her. Now, January in Canada is not warm. And she said, if I hadn't have figured out what was going on, I probably would have perished outdoors, because they would not let her back in through that door. The way that their luck was brought to them and their tradition for New Year's, you drove somebody, a stranger, out of your house at midnight and locked the door, and they had to come back in through a different door. And when they came in through the different door, that brought the luck for the year. So that's my final Hogmanay, or New Year's Eve, story. I'm going to get this up online now, and thank you very much for watching. And I hope you get to make some tablet and enjoy it. And Angel, as you can see, really would like to have the tablet. She's not getting it. It's too sweet. I've been wondering why the name. And I was cutting it up, and you cut it up into little tablets, so perhaps that's why it's called Tablet. Anyway, Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you very much for watching.
Acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance